All right, so welcome everyone. This is our science of raptors. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen with everybody and we will get started. So I'm gonna be honest with you, this was hard for me to do this one. I am a, sorry, I don't know what's going on here. I am a reptile person. As much as I love raptors, this was cool for me because I learned a lot about them, and I also saw a lot of similarities and characteristics as far as reptiles. So that was kind of nice to see. So if you're not familiar, birds and reptiles are very closely related to each other. And we're going to be talking a little bit about those characteristics as well. So, all right, we will go ahead and get started. So like I mentioned, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. All right, so with those questions in the chat, make sure that we're staying on topic and that everyone's nice to each other. Otherwise, we do have that ability to remove you from this virtual program. Also, I just want to point out, like I do every single science of, I am by no means an expert in any of the subjects that I talk about. I love science and I like the topics that I pick, but these are also topics that people have said in evaluations that they would like to see. So that's kind of what we're doing. I did a lot of research for this. And again, no means an expert. If you have questions that I cannot answer, I will find someone that can. So, all right. But we're going to go ahead today and talk about raptors, which in my head, I think everyone should know what a raptor is. But there are some people, when I say the word raptors, some of those general public and some people that are just not animal people or science people, they don't really know what a raptor is. When I say raptors, I kind of think I live in a bubble and I think everyone should know what a raptor is. So when I think of raptors, I think of birds. These are birds of prey that we're going to be talking about. These are things like hawks, eagles, owls, falcons, kites, ospreys, owls, all these different types of raptors. I just want people to know that I'm not talking about velociraptors. I am a huge Jurassic Park person, and I would love to talk to you. Email me if you'd like to talk dinosaurs, but raptor is not velociraptor. So I just, again, want to point out we're talking about birds today, hawks, eagles, owls, falcons, kites, all of those things, and not velociraptor. So, all right, so when we talk about a raptor, then the bird raptors, what are we talking about? So this is any bird of prey. So when I talk about a bird of prey, this is a group of birds that will hunt and feed on animals such as rabbits, rodents, fish, lizards, and even other birds. But please know that those are not the limiting things. There's lots of other specialized birds that feed on many different things. Sometimes when people talk about raptors, they really restrict that to the group that is the order, which are hawks, eagles, and falcons. It kind of depends on who you talk to. Some people just group raptors all together. Some people say no, that it's really restricted to a certain group of those birds of prey. But for the sake of the program today, I'm going to be talking about two orders, the falconiformes, which are the eagles, condors, buzzards, kites, that should say kites, sorry, ospreys, harriers, all of these other different types of birds. And then also the strigiformes group, which is their owls. Those are also birds of prey. They're just a little bit different than the ones that you see during the daytime. So just strictly for the program, that's what we're talking about today. So all raptors, no matter if they come out at night, if they come out during the daytime, what order they are in, they have certain characteristics that make them similar to each other. So they have hook-tipped beaks, very sharp curved claws, or we call them talons. They have very good eyesight and also very good hearing. So those are what we're talking about when we mean raptors. So what is a raptor? So raptor is actually, the word comes from raptere, which is Latin, which means to seize and carry off. So if you think about an eagle, a hawk, a falcon, any of those animals, they usually carry off their prey. They grab it with their talons and then they carry it off. We're also going to talk about condors, which are actually species of vulture, and eagles. They are the largest and the strongest members of this group. So when we're talking about the falcons and the strigiformes, the owls and the other animals, there's diurnal ones, which make up about 500 species of raptors. So these are going to be your eagles, your hawks, your kites, your Harriers, all of those different types. And then our owls, there's about 200 species. So this is worldwide. This is not just Nebraska. But these raptors are also going to be apex predators. So they play a key ecological role in helping to maintain the balance of a lot of different population controls of things like reptiles, of things like lizards and mice and other birds. So they eat other animals because they are the top of the food chain. They're also an indicator species. So these specific species, they give scientists kind of an insight on what is happening as far as the ecosystem. So are we seeing a lot of raptors? Are we not seeing a lot of raptors? Are we seeing our raptors are sick? If you are familiar or if you were around in the 70s, you may have heard of a particular pesticide called DDT, which is a shortened version of this very long pesticide that was used, which almost drove a lot of our raptor species, especially our bald eagles, almost to extinction. So it wasn't necessarily that it affected them firsthand, it was the food that they were eating. And so it worked its way up into the food chain. So when eagles or different types of raptors would lay eggs, they wouldn't have enough calcium in their shells. And so when the mom or the raptor went to sit on them and incubate them, they cracked because they were too fragile. And so we almost lost our eagle species. We almost lost a lot of our different raptor species. But once they kind of banned that DDT, we are kind of seeing a lot of our raptors are kind of coming back. So again, they're indicator species and they really help maintain that ecological control of the balance of the ecosystem. So when we talk about raptors, there's a lot of different kinds, and I mentioned them. I kind of just want to go through some of the major groups. Even though they're in the same order, I'm going to go through kind of just my ordering of them. So when I talk about a raptor, it's a generic term for all birds of prey. That's how I'm going to talk about it today. I know most people might be different, but raptor, that's a bird of prey. You have your accipiters. So these are relatively small, usually your forest hawks. They have rounded wings and they have long tails. You have your butios, which are your larger hawks. These are going to be like your red-tailed hawks. They have broad wings, relatively short tails when you talk about them. Your eagles, this one's pretty self-explanatory, bald eagle, golden eagle. These are very large soaring birds, and they happen to also be in the Accipitaridae family, but we're gonna kind of separate those out. And then you also have falcons. So these have tapered pointed wings. They were built for speed, and then they also are very agile when they fly. So if you live in Lincoln or you're familiar with the state capitol, we have peregrine falcons that nest on top of the state capitol. And so falcons kind of fall into that group as well. And then your harriers, these are medium-sized hawks. They fly really low, or sometimes they even will hover when they fly. All right, and then hawks, again, another generic kind of term, but these are different birds of prey. They often have short, rounded wings and longish tails. We also have kites, not like the flying kites that you do, but they are tapered winged birds with deeply forked tails. If you've ever heard of a Mississippi kite, that's kind of one that I learned when I first started learning what kites were. And then we also have ospreys. These are a little different. They are fish hunting raptors. So very pretty birds, but they are a little bit different in the fact that they hunt for live fish. And then we have our owls. These are generally nocturnal. They come out during the nighttime. They have an upright posture. They have an owl-like face. This is an owl right here. This is a great horned owl in the photo. And then they're not technically raptors, but I'm going to call them the raptors of the songbird world. You might have heard of a shrike. We have the loggerhead shrike, which is here in Nebraska. By far one of my favorite birds, simply because its nickname is the butcher bird. Very kind of a small bird. They're technically in the songbird family, but these guys will impale their food. So if you ever see like a lizard or a grasshopper, if you know what like black locust trees are or barbed wire, they literally impale their food on the barbed wire, leave it sit, and then come back to eat it. So that's why they're called the butcher birds. And then you have your vultures. So a lot of people do not consider vultures as birds of prey. I'm going to consider them today as a bird of prey just because I want to talk about them. But these are going to be exceptionally large. These are going to be your scavenger raptors. They have bald, often featherless heads. A very common one that we see are going to be like your turkey vultures. So those are kind of just like our types of birds as far as raptors go. All right, so key characteristics that all raptors are going to have. So they have talons, another fancy word for claws or toenails. This is what they use to catch, grasp, and kill their prey. Minus those vultures, a lot of them do not need sharp talons because they're not physically killing their prey is already dead. But large animals, large raptors like eagles, they can exert anywhere from about 500 pounds of pressure per square inch when they grab something and hold on to it. So imagine being a fish or another bird that they grab. These are going to be like your fork. So if you think about when you eat a steak or something with a fork, you stab it and you pierce through something. So that's piercing it, and then you can eat it. The feet are also going to be controlled by very strong muscles that allow them obviously to kill other animals. And sometimes raptors are going to take out things that are as big as themselves. All birds have talons or claws, but it is officially the raptors that have those very hooked, large, sharp talons. And then they are made from a protein called keratin, which we also have on our body. A lot of animals have this. It's your hair, it's your fingernails. If you know what a cow or a bull, the horns on them. If you look at a box turtle or any type of reptile, the scales, the turtle shell itself is also made out of that keratin as well. All right, so they have beaks. This is a huge major characteristic of all of our raptors. It's very strong. It's often curved because they have to pierce, tear, slice open things. This acts as their knife. So when people ask me if birds use utensils, yes, they do. They use a fork and they use their knife. They use their beak and their talons. This is what they're using to tear their prey into bite-sized pieces. And oftentimes, many raptors, this is their killing tool. This is what they use to physically kill their prey. Oftentimes, birds are specialized. We're going to be talking about one today called a snail eater. I won't give away the official name of the bird yet, but they eat snails, and their beak is so hooked because they have to get that gooey part of the snail out. So they are very, they evolved to fit with their food, as many birds did. Larger raptors have really heavy, powerful beaks for tearing. Smaller raptors, like our kestrels, have shorter beaks because they eat things like insects and mice. And then some birds also, like I mentioned, like our harpy eagles and the snail-eating birds are going to have very specialized beaks for their prey. They also have forward-facing eyes most of the time. Some of them do not, but they have binocular vision. So right now I am looking at you with binocular vision because my eyes are in the front. Usually there's a little saying that goes on with this, that if they're in the front, you hunt, and if they're on the side, you hide. That is not true for all animals. We're going to see that here in a second, because a lot of our raptors actually have birds or have eyes that are more onto the side of them. But combined with really good eyesight, this helps them be effective hunters. Their eyes are also very heavy. If people and raptors had similar comparison of size in their eyeballs, our eyes would be the size of tennis balls. So are not that big, but they also have a ring that holds them up as well. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. All right, so also a lot of raptors, their iris color is specific for each species. Not always, but usually specific for species. Sometimes it will vary with age, and it will also vary between male and female. In the larger raptors, like our hawks and our eagles, they have this thing called a supraorbital ridge, and you can kind of see it here above their eye. It almost looks like it gives them that fierce kind of look, like they're glaring at you a little bit. That is that supraorbital ridge. It's a bony projection in the eye that provides support and a little bit of shade, but also protection for their eye. And then their eyes are held in place by a bone called the sclerotic ring. Owls are going to be a little bit different since they are nocturnal. They're going to have tubular shaped eyes, which allows as much light as possible to come in during the nighttime because there's not a lot of light when they are out hunting during the nighttime. And then you're also going to have your hawk eyes. They're going to be a little bit more spherical. So they contain more cones and they absorb to produce a very sharp image. So people, our eyesight's very good, but it's nothing compared to like a hawk or an eagle. Hawks have around 12 times more cones in them than people. So what does that mean? They have an even sharper, clearer image so they can see like a small mouse in the grass. We don't have to do that. Our food's on a plate right in front of us. So we have good enough vision to see what we're eating. All right. And then also some birds have eyes, like I mentioned, kind of positioned on the sides of their head. It just depends on what they're eating. It depends on the species of birds. But most oftentimes they can see about 10 times better than we can. And then all raptors will have 2 sets of eyelids. This is very similar also to like crocodiles. They have 2 sets. They have one called a nictitating membrane, and then one just like a normal eyelid that we have. So the outer one is similar to ours, where it functions the same way in most birds. So it shuts it, it protects it, it keeps it moist. But then there's an inner eyelid, again, called, it's semi-translucent, so you can kind of see it if you look for it. It's called that nictitating membrane, and it cleans and it moistens the cornea. It's just extra protection for that animal. All right, so ears, this is the freaky part. So a lot of people think, if they don't know birds, like take a great horned owl, a lot of people think that the tufts on the birds, that's their ears. It's not. They really don't serve a purpose other than making them help camouflage, but they have outstanding hearing. So owls are known to hunt by sound because it's dark. So their ears are going to be hidden underneath their feathers, and this is what their ears look like. And again, great horned owls have amazing hearing. They can hear a mouse under about a foot of snow. And so the idea is that if an owl can see you, it can probably hear your heartbeat. That is crazy to me. But also the placement of them is going to be asymmetrical. So ours are pretty much on the same side of our head. Owls are going to have one up here and one down here because it's like surround sound, and it helps them kind of pinpoint what they're hearing and where they're hearing it. And they also have this cool, especially owls, they have a facial disc of feathers that they can kind of move to be able to hear. Again, it's just, again, like surround sound. It helps them pinpoint with like precision accuracy where that prey is. All right, so their plumage. Males are usually going to be identical to females, but again, this is not always, and not a lot of species. Some species look nothing alike, the male and the female. Females also tend to be slightly or noticeably larger than males. We think this is because they have to lay eggs. It's because they're incubating, and it's also because they protect their eggs. Males also usually smaller because they're more agile, and it helps them be more efficient hunters. Juveniles, oftentimes they don't look like their parents. Raptors usually live quite a long time. So when they're young, they usually have less dramatic plumage because they're not trying to attract a mate at this point. So if you think of a bald eagle young, juveniles look nothing really like the adults. They don't get that white head, I think, until about like 4 years old, and maybe even sooner or older than that. But again, they're just not becoming sexually mature right now, so they don't really need those breeding colors. All right, so nests. A lot of times big raptors will form platform nests. So this is like the typical like eagle or hawk nest that you find. It's a very shallow depression, which they use for the eggs. They get material sometimes by flying by a dead tree branch, grabbing it, ripping it off, and taking it back. Like I mentioned, common in bald eagles and ospreys. The nests can be rearranged. They can be added to. Sometimes they will come back and use them year after year after year. Sometimes they can be up to 10 feet long or deep, and they can also weigh a ton. Over time, they just keep building onto it. Stuff falls off, they keep building onto it, and they become very heavy over time. Usually it is a mating characteristic for both the male and the female to build a nest together. Not always, but sometimes. Young raptors also, they just don't know how to build a nest. So oftentimes they don't build quality nests. It takes them a while to understand how to do this. So over time, they will build one, it will fall down, it will blow in the wind, something will happen to it. They kind of learn over time how to build a nest. There's also ground nests. So not every raptor builds a quintessential nest that you think of. So this nest is literally built on the ground, or sometimes in low shrubs or trees. They very sparingly use sticks. For instance, like northern harriers, they will construct a nest of like loose grass or other plant material. Or you might hear of like a scrape nest. These are for raptors that are oftentimes nesting on the edge of cliffs or like a sheer face. So instance like a falcon. And then owls don't often or at all construct nests. Great horned owls will often use old nests of like crows and hawks. They just don't do it themselves. They reuse them. And screech owls, barred owls, they will use a cavity nest. So this picture that I have here is a screech owl, and they oftentimes will just nest in the hole of a natural cavity in a tree. And they will also use nest boxes as well. All right, so then most hawks, eagles, owls, kites, falcons, vultures, they don't migrate, but that's not always true. There's never a this is this and this is that. It's never black and white. So some do and some don't. But many raptors do migrate to areas with just higher concentrations of food. There are complete migrators, which have a very predictable movements. They leave at set times. They go to the same places. These guys travel like unbelievable distances, 15,000 miles or more sometimes in their lifetime. Others migrate just a few hundred miles. They're still called complete migrators. And then we also have partial migrators. These are going to be like your American kestrels. They move far enough east or west to find food. And it's also dependent on the weather and dependent on how much food there is. If there's a lot of food that year, there's no reason to migrate and expel that energy. So sometimes we call that a seasonal movement. And if you're looking at this picture, it is not raptors, they're geese. And I tried to just pick a photo that showed migration. And then we have what's called eruptive migrators. These are very unpredictable. Sometimes they go every 3rd year, sometimes they go every 5th year, or some very extreme cases every 10th year. These are triggered by the source of food. So how much food is there? Is the population density high or not? These are going to be like your snowy owls. Sometimes we see them in Nebraska, sometimes we do not. And then you have your non-migrators. They do not fly very far from their territory. A lot of owls will do this as well, like barred owls will do this too. And then daytime flying raptors, they generally will nest at night or rest at night. They hunt early in the morning. And how do they get from place to place? We believe they use landforms and the rising and setting sun. And then also wind is crucial for a lot of raptors and any bird species because it allows them to expel less energy when they're traveling. All right, so that was kind of just like an overview of what a raptor is, some characteristics about them. And so I'll go ahead and check the chat here. So we have quite a few messages. What does diurnal mean? Ooh, good question. Someone asked, thank you very much. Diurnal means daytime. Someone asked what an apex predator is, top of the food chain. You guys are so nice. Thank you for helping me out here. I think that, oh, that was it. I appreciate all of you guys helping out and answering those questions. Thank you so much. I need to remember that sometimes that not everyone knows. Again, I live in a bubble. I need to remember that not everyone knows those things. So thank you for helping me out. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the raptors that we have here in Nebraska. Again, this is by no means every single one. That would take all day to do this. And I did miss kind of a few key ones that I'm sure someone's gonna be sad about, but these are the ones that I kind of just picked out as far as ones that you might not have heard about before and ones that are just kind of unique or interesting in Nebraska. All right, this is one of my favorite raptors. We have a couple of kestrels that are in our, not in our Game and Parks building, but outside we have a nest box, and every day when we leave work, we hear them. But they are the smallest falcon in North America. They're also pretty widespread. These guys are commonly seen, they're perched on roadside wires, and they're also, usually when you see them, they're hovering really low in fields. These guys like to eat large insects. They love grasshoppers, but they will also eat other birds, reptiles, small mammals as well. Male and female, these are ones that have different markings on them. So they are not the same when you look at them. These guys also, like I mentioned, they utilize nest boxes a lot. So one of the ways that scientists and biologists are able to help raptors is a lot of them utilize nest boxes, and that's a great way to keep population numbers up. So this is the really good way as far as kestrels even. So they're also usually a complete migrator. They are in the southern states. They go to Mexico or Central America, it just kind of depends on the year. But these guys really like kind of open or semi-open areas, forest clearings, farmlands, deserts. They're found pretty much widespread across North America. All right, peregrine falcons. These, a lot of kids know these because they are fast. Again, these are the ones that in the Capitol here in Lincoln, Nebraska, they perch and they have a nest up on top of the Capitol. So one of the world's fastest birds. When they dive, they've been clocked at over 200 miles an hour. Think of a race car. like they're going as fast as a race car. They're also found on 6 different continents. But the tricky thing is that they're not very common on those 6 different continents. So in the 20th century, that DDT stuff that I mentioned, it really hurt our peregrine falcons, and they're starting to come back, but it was definitely a hit for them. These guys, like I mentioned, they fly really high and then they dive and they grab their prey. So they love pigeons, shorebirds. They mostly hunt other birds. They don't want to waste their time with like a grasshopper or an insect. Also small mammals. They may mate for life. They're very territorial, and their courtship displays are very unique as well. Females, this is one again where females are noticeably larger than males because they incubate, they lay the eggs, they protect the eggs. And like I mentioned, in Nebraska, these will actually be on the Capitol. And if you, during their nesting season, you can, there's a live cam up there that you can see them and watch them, which is kind of cool. All right, these are your sharp-shinned hawks. These guys look fierce, in my opinion. They're a small woodland hawk. They have this tiny little head. They're often confused with a Cooper's hawk. And I'm not a bird person, but I always have to be like, okay, Cooper's, sharp-shinned, I always have to like take a minute and double check this here. So they're the smallest hawk in Canada and United States. They have very long legs. They have very long tails, but it helps them navigate and acrobatically fly in the woods. They're most likely to see them during a fall migration. Depends on where you are. Like I see them and it's definitely not spring or fall migration. That's a likely good time to see them. Sometimes people call them a complete migrator. Sometimes they're a partial migrator. They do visit suburban areas, especially if you have bird feeders. They're not dumb. They know where the food is. So it's like an easy meal. They'll, songbird hanging out at a feeder, or there's mice around the grain. They use their very long toes to basically impale and hold their moving prey. They have been noticed, the wire mesh traps that sometimes people will trap other birds in, they can reach in there, grab it with their long toes and pull them out. And then, like any good mate, before they deliver prey to each other, the male will typically, bite off and remove the head and eat it before he gives it to his female. So like any good man. All right, and then a northern harrier. A lot of people have never heard of this bird and don't know that we have them in Nebraska. They're pretty distinctive. They have almost like when you look on them straight on, they have like an owl looking face, but they have a very long tail. They hold their wings in a V shape, but up close, like I mentioned, they have an owl-like face. They also have those facial disc feathers that help them listen for sound. So same thing like an owl, it helps direct that sound and helps them kind of pinpoint their location. Same thing for their feathers. Fall through the spring, if you look for harriers and you want to see one, find them in wide open grasslands. They often fly very low, but in the spring and fall migration, you might see them fly very high. But again, good time to see them is the spring and fall migration. They can have up to 5 mates at once. Most likely though, they're gonna have 1 or 2. They will hunt small mammals and birds. And oftentimes they will take like a larger bird, like a duck, and they will drown it before they eat it. So raptors are fierce. Raptors are fierce. All right, here's another cool, this looks like a Harry Potter bird, in my opinion, the northern goshawk. Kind of similar to a Cooper's hawk and a sharp-shinned hawk, but they're bigger, they're fiercer, and they're more wild. They are that accipiter hawk, so they have short, broad wings. They have a kind of a rudder-like tail that really gives them that agile flying ability. They have bold white eyebrow stripes, and they have piercing, like reddish orange eyes. The goshawk actually comes from an Old English word meaning goose hawk because of what they eat. So they use a lot of different foods. They pretty much eat whatever they can catch. Falconers have been using these for thousands of years, up to 2,000 years. And if you're a familiar history person, if you know who Attila the Hun was, he actually wore an image of a northern goshawk on his helmet in battle. And then this one I thought was kind of interesting is that a pair, a male and a female, can maintain and build up to 8 alternate nests. So if something happens to one of them, they just go to the next one. But this also gives them a chance to switch it up, or they will use the same nest over and over again if it's a good one. All right, Ferruginous hawk. I had never heard of this hawk until I started to hear about 10 years ago, I could not pronounce this word, Ferruginous Hawk. Ferruginous kind of means they just kind of a rusty color. So they're one of the largest hawks in North America. They have this kind of unique gray-like head, but they really get that rusty or that ferruginous color on their shoulders and their legs. There is a rarer, darker morph, which is almost like a reddish chocolate color. They eat small mammals, and these guys will actually sit and wait above a prairie dog burrow or a ground squirrel burrow and wait for their prey to come out and then grab it. In Nebraska, if you'd like to see one, they're more out in the western side of the state, but they have relatively long, kind of narrow pointed wings. Oftentimes, like I mentioned, when they sit and wait for these prairie dogs or ground squirrels to come out, they will almost start like this feeding frenzy. They attract a lot of different animals, other sometimes golden eagles, bald eagles, other types of hawks, and they just get this huge feeding frenzy for these poor rodents that are going around. They will usually often use pre-existing nests, so they will not build their own. And oftentimes they're a complete migrator to southern states, Mexico, but some do not migrate at all. Again, there's no black and white on animals here. All right, golden eagle. So this is a very large bird. It's the largest raptor that we have in Nebraska and the largest raptor, depends on what you want to call the condor, but largest raptor in North America. Males weigh up to 8 to 10 pounds. Females are 10 to 12 pounds. Again, noticeably larger than the males. You can see them statewide in the wintertime, but most of the time I've seen them out in western Nebraska. Sometimes they will even attract and fight larger predators. They have been noted fighting coyotes and even bears in defense. They are absolutely also totally capable of killing domestic livestock, wild ungulates, cranes. Most of the times they're eating things like prairie dogs, jackrabbits, and ground squirrels. They can live quite a long time, up to 30 years. Some adult residents are permanent, some migrate. Usually the younger ones will migrate where the adults will kind of stay where they are. And then one of the things that's neat is how they kill their prey. It's been noted, and not maybe in Nebraska, we don't have a lot of cliffs in Nebraska, but out in the western part of the United States, when they grab food, if it's like some type of mountain goat where they're climbing those sheer face cliffs, the golden eagle will kind of circle around it. It'll grab it and drag it down a hill and basically let gravity do its job. And then when it falls off the cliff, it will go down and eat it. So if you're thinking about this, 8 to 10 pound bird taking on this wild ungulate livestock, it's crazy. If you watch a YouTube video on it, it's pretty interesting how this hawk is taking out these mountain goats. So. All right, ospreys are really unique. These guys are live fish and they dive in the water to catch them. And they have some very cool adaptations on them. They have the feathers on their thighs are very short and they're kind of oily and stiff. So they repel that water. The top of their nostril, their beak has nostrils. They can close them at will when they dive into the water so they don't get water in their nose. They also have barbed pads on the soles of their feet so that they can grip slippery fish. I know it's hard to see, but if they would turn to the side and do a profile picture, their beak is really hooked so they can rip open that hard scales of their fish. And then these guys are also incredible migrators. They've been clocked, some 15, 20-year-old ospreys have been clocked doing 160,000 migration miles in their lifetime. That's a ton of miles to put on a bird. They also are very efficient hunters. Most of the time, about 1 out of every 4 dives utilizes them getting a fish. So 25% efficiency rate is not bad. Sometimes they're even up to 70%. So almost every time that they go to get food, they catch something. Most of the time they will build nests on man-made structures. And then these guys, their eggs do not hatch all at once. So oftentimes the first chick will hatch and then the next one will hatch like 5 days later. Oftentimes what happens is the young one will not survive. The older one will oftentimes get more food. It will just be bigger and kind of push the other one out. And then during migration, they can actually be found statewide here in Nebraska. All right, this is my favorite bird. I'm going to admit that. This is my favorite bird. This is a turkey vulture. These guys are very common. More than often than not, I'm sure every single person has seen one of these. If you have traveled and you look up and see a big soaring bird, oftentimes it's a red-tailed hawk or it's a turkey vulture. More than likely it's a turkey vulture. These guys have a V shape in their wings when they fly. It always looks like they're very unstable. They like wobbly when they fly, but they ride thermal currents and they have an amazing sense of smell, which is very unique for birds because birds don't need to smell. These guys do because they're hunting for dead food. They need to find it. So these guys have really, like I mentioned, great olfactory systems. So their smell, it is one of the strongest olfactory systems in the animal kingdom. So these guys, they can detect if you have a trillion little parts and you put 3 little balls in there, they can detect those 3 little smells in a trillion other parts. So again, great smelling system. They're a little different than the vultures that you see like on National Geographic, the ones in Africa. Those are old world vultures. These guys are considered new world vultures. They're very different taxonomic orders even if they're the same vultures. So the word vulture actually comes from velaire, which means to pluck or tear. And 3 of my favorite facts right here about turkey vultures. As a defense mechanism, they will vomit. I've seen this firsthand. I was at a program one time and they had a turkey vulture sitting on someone's arm and they were showing it off and they said, please do not run up here. It scares the turkey vultures. One kid, of course, did not listen. He ran up to the turkey vulture. Turkey vulture kind of like freaked out and moved its wings and like vomited all over this kid. So if you can imagine what that would smell like. But also when it's hot, they are defecating on their feet because they keep cool. So that's one of the ways that they keep cool. And then they have such strong stomach acid. So when they're eating this dead food on the side of the road, the stomach acid, they could eat through anthrax, tuberculosis, and even something that was a rabid animal and they would not get sick. So their stomach acid is that strong that it can like fight off all of those different types of diseases. So these guys are just our cleanup crew. We really appreciate that they eat that stuff so that they don't get that stuff does not get into the ecosystem. All right, and I gotta talk about some owls. So our little eastern screech owl here, these guys are tiny. They're like no bigger than a pint glass. They're very common east of the Rocky Mountains. You can find them in parks, anywhere where there's lots of trees. These guys have amazing camouflage too. They sound like the whinny of a horse. They do not screech. Barn owls screech. But these guys kind of whinny like a horse. Males are actually smaller than the females, but they have a deeper voice. Oftentimes, if you want to find a screech owl, look for the mobbing behavior in things like chickadees, jays, or titmice. They're trying to get that animal away by annoying it and mobbing it. So lots of different types of birds are going to be basically annoying that bird. Oftentimes when you see that in the city, it's going to be a screech owl. These guys will produce owl pellets. A lot of raptors and birds will produce pellets. You may have had students or kids even dissect owl pellets before. This is what they're dissecting. So they will regurgitate the bones, the fur, the feathers, everything that is not able to digest, that is what they're puking up. Sorry, it's not puke, that is what they're regurgitating up. There are red and gray individuals. Around a third of all the screech owls are going to be red. Pairs are often monogamous and mate for life, but some males will mate with more than 2 females. Second female is going to be like, yep, I'm not going to be second. So she will actually evict that first female and then just incubate 2 clutches of eggs. All right, and then we have the barn owl. These guys are strictly nocturnal. They're very lanky. They have this kind of ghost white figure on them. They live up to their name, barn. They will roost in barns or abandoned buildings. They will not hoot. A lot of people think all owls will hoot. These guys screech, but screech owls whinny. Females are also going to be showier than the males. This is different. Oftentimes they will be more heavily spotted on their chest and a little bit more reddish in color. Some scientists believe that that indicates the quality of that female. They believe that the more spots they have on them, the fewer parasites they get. They also might be more resistant to parasites and disease. We're not 100% sure, but that's what some people have theorized. They also locate their prey by sound, and these, out of any animal tested, they have the best hearing of any animal they've ever tested. So strictly they hunt by sound. All right, and then we have a barn and a barred owl. So barred owls are going to be a little bit bigger. They look very different. They're kind of mottled. They have these kind of like jail stripes on them, vertical bars on their chest. These guys like anywhere that have very mature deciduous trees and evergreen trees as well. They nest in tree cavities. They eat a lot of small mammals, mice, rodents, frogs, salamanders, snakes, really anything. They're a permanent resident, so they do not migrate. We have them pretty much everywhere on the eastern part of Nebraska. We have one that sits in the back of our kind of foresty area and behind our house. And every once in a while you hear this, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" So they're not actually saying that, but if you listen, that's kind of their sound. And then they also have this screechy, like monkey-like call. I am not going to do that one for you, but if you would like to YouTube it, it's kind of an interesting sound. All right, so that was quickly the raptors that we have here in Nebraska. And again, I did not go through them. I missed the red-tailed hawk. I missed the bald eagle. I missed a lot of them, but those are the ones I just kind of wanted to highlight for you. So I know we're kind of running on time here. It's about 42 now. I'm gonna go ahead and do the raptors. I only have about 5 more slides, and then I'll come back and answer questions for you. All right, so we do not have these in Nebraska, but these are some of the most interesting raptors that are in the world. Harpy eagles are just by far my favorite. I just wanted to talk about harpy eagles today. These guys are huge. They have one of the most powerful and largest raptors in the world. Their rear talons are 4 to 5 inches long, which are about the same as a grizzly bear. So just kind of put that into perspective. They're native to Central and South America. Weird because they live in the rainforest. They will kind of just do a sit and wait strategy. They wait and they will feed on opossums, monkeys, and sloths. They have a wingspan of 6.5 feet. I'm 5'8", so their wingspan's longer than I am tall. They also have these facial like disc feathers, very similar to an owl. It just, again, helps direct that sound. Their eyesight is 8 times better than ours. They can live 35 to 45 years. What's kind of sad for these guys is that they reproduce only every 2 to 3 years. And when they do, they only lay 1 or 2 eggs. That's very, very low reproductive rate. So that could probably hurt them in the future. But when scientists find these animals, they believe that their presence indicates that species in the ecosystem are in balance. So again, there's a large apex predator taking out smaller animals as well. All right, again, one of the weirdest raptors. It's a tall one, tallest raptor in the world. It's called a Secretarybird. These guys are really weird. We saw them in Africa, but they're so cool. They have the longest legs of any prey, raptor, bird of prey. They actually have to bend down and crouch down when they feed and drink. They're endemic to sub-Saharan Africa. We saw them in Namibia, in Kruger National, or in Etosha National Park. They walk around about 12 to 18 miles a day. So we have a Fitbit counter, put that on this bird. They're also great flyers, which in my opinion, they do not look like good flyers, but they are. They are true diurnal raptors. They hunt just before dawn, and they often will roost the rest of the day. They just eat about pretty much anything they can catch. Small mammals, hedgehogs, hares. These guys will actually go after and eat cobras, which are venomous, and then also puff adders, which are very venomous as well. They will just stomp on their food or chase it at high speeds and then eat it. So very cool raptors. All right, earlier I mentioned these snail eating birds. So these guys are like the most specialized raptor in the world. If you look at their beak, it is highly curved. They're found in the United States, but only, they're endemic to Florida, but then they have ranged down a little bit to like the Caribbean. They are considered locally endangered, but they fly very low over lakes and ponds. Males and females, these are one that look very different from each other, but they both have red eyes. They also, because of their name, they feed mostly exclusively on freshwater snails. So they grab the snail, they use their hooked beak to take out all the gooey parts, and then they leave behind the shell. But they can also eat crabs, crayfish, and rodents, and even small turtles. And then this one I thought is kind of neat is that sometimes during nesting season, the female will just leave the male, go find another mate, and then have 2 clutches of eggs. So she'll find a new mate and raise young with that one and then leave the male with the other one. So kind of an interesting thing for birds. All right, I had to throw in another vulture in here. This is the Egyptian vulture, which is kind of an odd looking bird, even for a vulture species. They have a very narrow black tipped beak, which is kind of weird for vultures. They usually have a little bit more broad, kind of heavier beak. But this is one of the few birds that actually has been seen using tools. So they will use smooth stones to break open eggs. And they've also been seen using sticks, and they will gather and roll wool so that they can line their nests with it. These guys are represented in Egyptian culture as being royalty. There are 3 subspecies for this bird, but in areas on 3 different continents. You would think Egyptian vulture would be found in Egypt. Well, yes, they are, but in 3 different continents, actually. And Iran and Turkey are going to be 2 of the best places to see one of these birds because this is their breeding areas. They will pretty much eat anything from garbage to carrion. So they also eat eggs of flamingos, pelicans, ostriches. And this is interesting. They will eat fecal matter. So human fecal matter, animal fecal matter. Scientists believe that they're eating it because there are these special, they're called carotenoids. This like chemical that's in there, it helps colorate their orange and red on their face. So that's why we believe that they eat that. And then oftentimes when you see like a bunch of vultures kind of flying in together, these guys are a little smaller, so they have to stay kind of in the backs and wait for all of the larger vultures to eat first, and then they are welcome to go. All right, this one, Steller sea eagle, very interesting, kind of an old world bird. It's been called the world's most magnificent bird of prey. They're very dark, but they have this bright yellow beak and feet. They believe are like these glacial relics. They've been staying in this narrow northeastern Asian coast for so long. They've been there through multiple ice age cycles. They haven't really changed a lot. And they are one of the rarest raptors in the world. Very little is known about these just because their nesting site is so remote. It's a very rocky cliff face area in northeastern Siberia and into Russia, but they mainly eat salmon and trout, but they will also take puffins, other fish, crabs, and once in a while they will eat deer carcasses as well. But just like the bears, they will take advantage of all the salmon runs. That's the time for them to eat. And then again, typically a pair, like many eagles, will return to the same nest over and over again. All right, this is a cute little owl. It's called an Oriental Bay owl. This is a nocturnal owl that roosts in the holes and trees of tree trunks. They're in the same family as barn owls. So if you look at them and look at a barn owl, they look very similar to each other. They have this very loud, eerie whistling sound, but they have, again, those facial discs on their feathers that help them direct that sound. They're found in places like Nepal, Burma, Thailand. They have been recorded in the Philippines before, but they like dense evergreen forests. They feed on very small insects like cicadas, beetles, grasshoppers, but also things like snakes and mice and birds. They're very rare. A lot of people do not see them. And one kind of weird thing about them is they sleep so deeply that they've been known that humans come up to like right up to them and they scare them. So I don't know if that's good for a bird or not. Maybe that's why they're rare, but they sleep very deeply, I guess. All right, and I can't do raptors without talking about our condor species. So largest wild birds in North America. Their wings are very long and broad. And if you see a picture of them flying, it almost looks like they have fingertips because their wings are kind of spread out. Their tail is very short and broad. They have this naked head. They're kind of yellowish. These guys live forever. They live 60 or more years. They nest in caves on cliff faces. There for a while, there were very, very few of them left. They're doing better now. At one point, I believe there was like less than 30 left, so not very many, but they rarely flap their wings. They're very good soarers. They actually are social birds, so they spend a lot of time in groups, and their groups are called carcasses because of course they are, they're condors. But like I mentioned, they feed on carrion like deer, cattle, pigs, rabbits, sea lions, whales, whatever they can find. But this is interesting because unlike our turkey vulture, which hunts by smell, these guys have amazing eyesight. They do not use smell like turkey vultures. So again, very, very different. We talked about turkey vultures and we talked about condors here. Same vulture group, but yet very different. Old world versus new world vultures. All right, so again, hope you learned a lot about not this raptor, but these raptors. So raptors are a very interesting group of birds. They have so many cool, unique characteristics, but just birds do in general. So raptors, again, are just very, very, very cool animals. All right, so that's all that I have for you today. We'll go ahead and answer some questions here, but we have one more Science Of coming up next week, and it's going to be on the science of night sky ecology. So this is going to be how animals use the night sky, some things about light pollution, talking about animals that use the night sky to navigate. So everything about how animals utilize that night sky. And then if you really like this, we have a bunch of them on our education YouTube channel. If you go search Nebraska Game and Parks education YouTube channel, we have a playlist called Science Of. You can find a bunch of different episodes like this on there. We also have a Facebook page, we have an Instagram page, and then we also have our education website that has free downloadable activities and more information on there as well. And then, like I mentioned, we will go ahead and answer questions, but please join me next week for night sky ecology. So I will go ahead and escape to this here, stop sharing my screen, and then just letting everybody know, I did record this. We will put it on our education YouTube channel. It'll probably be Monday by the time I get it on there. And then also just letting everybody know that registered, I will be sending you an email probably on Monday as well, with the link to this video, and then also some resources that are good for identifying raptors, some good field guides, that kind of stuff. And then also we will talk about I just lost my train of thought here. Oh, evaluation. So if you liked this and you would prefer to fill out an evaluation, that would be great. This helps us make our programs better. And then also, if you do fill out an evaluation, we will give you some Science Of swag. So I'm not gonna tell you what it is, but we will give you some swag. So, all right, a lot of chat things. Hopefully, I see you guys again are so nice. Thank you. Someone said they saw a Peregrine Falcon this morning. Very cool. It does sound like a Harry Potter character, like the Ferruginous. It does. I agree with you on that one, Sarah. Someone else loves turkey vultures. Great. Osprey cam near Fort Calhoun. Yes, thank you, Kathy. I did forget about that, but thanks for putting that in. If you'd like to watch their Osprey cam, Fort Calhoun's kind of up by in Washington County, kind of up by Omaha. Someone said +8 skunks. Not sure I want to smell that. You're absolutely right. Great horned owls will eat skunks. I don't want to smell that either, Donna. All right, thank you, Bob. I wasn't sure of their pH as far as a turkey vulture stomach, but their acid level is about a pH of less than 1. So very, very, very acidic. Someone said they looked like a dinosaur. Yes, Steller's eagle erupted into the US and flew all the way east and returned to the west, and were followed by birders all the way. It does not surprise me. People love birds. And that's about it. Good. Thank you for everyone for helping answer questions. That makes it so much easier for me and not having a moderator today. But thank you again. I will stick on for another maybe 20 seconds or so. If you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Otherwise, we will see you next week for night sky ecology. So thank you, everyone. I'll have to say that I love birds too. I don't know if anyone in my group is going to hear me, but birds are pretty cool. So, all right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.